Thank you. So thank you again, Matthew and Shino, for starting us off. And your meditation really made me feel a little more calm before I spoke. So that's very helpful. So I appreciate that. Thank you. So today I'd like to start with some of the words from the scriptures that really, I think it's the reason why I am a Wan Buddhist. So they say Buddhism is the unsurpassed great path. Our aim is to become adherents of a broad and consummate religion by incorporating and making use as well of the doctrines of all the world's religions. So my whole life, I've pretty much been a studier of theology and philosophy, all through high school and college. And I've embraced many faith systems, many belief systems. But when I finally arrived at the One Dharma Center in Claverack through a friend, it all seemed to fit and make sense, because the lack of judgment about who we are and whether we're on the path or not on the path just made me feel like I am one with everything. So, and some of you have been there when Reverend Kim has stretched her arms out and looked around and said, "All Buddhas." And when she does that, it just pierces right into your soul. There could be 50 people at the One Dharma Center, and her words just make you feel like, okay, you believe in me. Yes, it's okay. It's okay. It's really, and I'm part of this oneness. So, and all the other ministers there have been incredible as well. So when I was on my last retreat, so I started to attend the services, do some reading, attend a lot of retreats, as many as I could. The last retreat that I went to, I made a list of 5 resolutions to bring back with me to practice. And I put this list up by my closet, so when I woke up in the morning, I could take a look at them and just know that this is where I want to be. And I don't always look at them and I don't always follow them, but I'll tell you what they are. And the first one is metta, or loving kindness. So sending loving kindness out to myself and to the world. The next one is forgiveness. So forgiving, especially myself, for not always being on the path, and then forgiving others as well. The next one, pretty lofty, is healing the world of suffering and the causes of suffering. The next one is to spend more time in meditation. And the last one is to pause before eating or speaking. So I try to follow those. As I said, what I love about Wan Buddhism is that we're accepted. There's no judgment. So what I'd like to do now is talk about some of the readings and some of the other people that I've read that I believe really enhance everything about Wan Buddhism. And they're not Wan Buddhists. So the first one is Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I couldn't talk tonight without bringing her name up. And no matter how you feel about her, she, for me, with her lace collar that's interwoven around and around her neck, just reminds me of the epitome of equality and justice and oneness. So this is one of the things she said: work for what you believe in, but pick your battles and don't burn your bridges. Don't be afraid to take charge. Think about what you want, then do the work. But then enjoy what makes you happy and bring along your crew, your Sangha. Have a sense of humor. When a thoughtless or unkind word is spoken, best tune out. Reacting in anger or annoyance will not advance one's ability to persuade. So I know that she's not a Wan Buddhist, but to me, her words really exemplify that whole thing about acceptance and non-judgment, but also sticking with what you believe in and working for equality and justice, which she always did. So another reading that my husband and I have done, and this book is about 25 years old. It's called The Holy Man, and I don't know if you've ever read it. It's a series of vignettes about a monk that lived up in a hermitage with a bunch of other monks. And basically, his name was Joe. People would come up to see him. He embraced all faith systems. People would come up to visit. He would greet them at the front door, and then they would walk from the front of the house to the back of the house. And at the back of the house, they'd say, "But I want to meet the holy man." And he'd say, "Well, you just met him. Treat everyone as if they were the holy man." And then he would send them on their way. But there were some people that would stop him and say, "Wait, I just have a question. I have something I have to ask you." And so there were fussy people and angry people and unsettled people and cross people. And one of the stories in here really spoke to me. So, and the story is called Choice. So the man said to Joe, "I have so many troubles. I don't know where to begin." And he had a face unhappy enough to back up his claims. "Nothing goes right for me in my life. I continually find I'm in abusive relationships, first with my father, then my wife, and since my divorce with other friends and lovers. I know I must seek out the wrong people, but how do I stop? Even understanding my problems, and God knows I have I've had plenty of therapy, I keep ending up with the wrong people in my life. This is also true in my job. Even my children ill-treat me, even my dog." So the holy man listened as the man went on in this vein, and then during a pause, he asked him, "How do you feel about your height?" "My height? I don't think about it." He frowned and puckered his lips. "Height?" he considered. "My height is all right. Why?" So he said, "For those of us who are not born into an inescapable prison of poverty and disease," said the holy man, "there is a world of choice open to us. I have reflected long upon this matter and now understand that the only thing we have no choice about in life is our height. That is the only thing that is a given. We get to complain about our height, and that is all." "That would be a silly thing to complain about," said the pilgrim from his lofty stance of having so many serious things to protest. "Yes, very silly, since we can't do anything about it," Joe smiled, "but not so silly as complaining about all the troubles in our life we can choose to change." So that's one of my favorites. There's so many little stories in this book. So right action, choice, it just spoke to me. And he brings up Buddhist precepts and Jewish precepts and Christian precepts all throughout the book. It's very interesting read. So someone else that I would like to mention is the late brother Wayne Teasdale. And he coined the term interspiritual to describe the shared mystic heart beating in the center of the world's deepest spiritual traditions. In other words, all the traditions are really telling us the same thing. And if I could repeat, incorporating and making use as well of the doctrines of all the world's religions. So the last person I wanted to quote was someone named Mirabai Starr. And she said, we must immerse ourselves in the well of wisdom all religions offer, allowing these encounters to change us from within. We must love as we have never loved before. And I really believe in this time of COVID, where people are feeling anxious and afraid and worried and, very unsettled, that we must love as we have never loved before, and believe that this one circle that we have in Won Buddhism is what can really cement that for us and keep us on the path. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Christine. Now we bring it over to Bob.
Well, thank you. I think the presenters, well, first of all, I'll say Christine has stolen some of my thunder, which you'll see in a moment. But I think the presenters last week, especially Tiffany, but all of those previous presenters, including Christine from the previous weeks, have set the bar pretty high for me. And I've been a little concerned about that. Just a moment. What? Excuse me. My wife just came in needing the number to get in the room. There you go. I'm sorry. Sometimes in my Thursday Dharma talks, my discussion group, I feel like the old Peanuts cartoon, the one where Charlie Brown, Linus, and Lucy are lying on the grass and they're looking up at the clouds in the sky. And Lucy says, Linus, what do you see in those clouds? And Linus says, well, I see Beethoven at his piano, and there's a candelabra on the piano, and he's composing his Ninth Symphony. Why? What do you see, Lucy? And Lucy says, well, I see Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo at that cloud over there, and he's on his horse, and there's hundreds of cavalry and infantry and cannons booming behind him. And then Lucy says, well, Charlie Brown, what do you see in the clouds? And Charlie says, well, I was going to say a horsey or maybe a ducky, but I think I've changed my mind. So that's how I feel about giving a presentation today. I was really taken this week with Reverend Yu's Dharma talk, which started with the question, what do we really want in life? And he said most people want success, maybe a nice house, maybe a nice car, and we all want happiness. And so he posed the question, well, what is success? And I think simply put, Buddhists want happiness through the Buddha, the Sangha, and the Dharma. Many years ago, I was in a study group where one week we were asked to bring a list of the people we admired. Now remember, I'm 75 years old, so I remember listing Senator Everett Dirksen and Congressman Barbara Jordan. They became famous on the televised Watergate Committee. I also said I admired Dwight Eisenhower for his leadership in World War II, although that was just before my time. But I remember him as president. I also listed Harry Truman and General George Marshall, who designed the Marshall Plan to help Europe recover from World War II. And then later he served as Secretary of Defense and Secretary of State, and he won a Nobel Prize. So there's probably several others that I don't remember, but this was 25 or 30 years ago. So who would I admire today and why? Remember, these are people that I've never met, but I've seen enough of them to feel I know them. So people like Bill and Melinda Gates might come to mind, Dr. Fossey, Malala, but there's lots of other famous people, living and dead, actors, actresses, business people, athletes, artists, engineers, the astronauts, even philanthropists who have accomplished great things. But Reverend Yu reminded me of why I had those specific people on my list of those I really admired. It was not just what they accomplished, but who they were. I could list dozens, or given time, maybe hundreds of people who accomplished great things in many fields, but I don't feel I know their hearts or their minds. But those I listed, I knew enough about them to feel I know who they were, not just what they did. As Christine said, last week we lost an American icon. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the notorious RBG. I'd previously seen the documentary about her and the movie made about her. And of course, there's been lots on the news this week. And I almost know her story. She was criticized for taking a man's place at Columbia Law School. But she graduated first in her class. Nobody would hire her because she was Jewish. She was a woman and she had a child. But she worked her way up to the highest calling possible for an American lawyer, to be appointed to the Supreme Court. And while she was there, she had an incredible impact on making the lives of women in our country equal to that of men, although we've got a ways to go yet. And some now say even her dissenting opinions will be studied in law schools for decades. But again, those were just accomplishments. But from what I know about her, it's clear to me she had a good heart, overcoming incredible obstacles in her career while raising a family, and later nursing a husband who was dying of cancer, and at the same time surviving numerous bouts of cancer herself. It certainly didn't hurt that she was brilliant, but that alone does not make a good person. But she was dedicated to making the lives of all Americans better. And importantly, she did it with the faith, zeal, dedication, and certainly a questioning mind that Reverend Yu reminded us of. She also had a great sense of humor, another indication of her happiness despite the stresses of her life. Reverend Yu also said this trip to happiness and away from suffering is a journey, not just a destination, and that mind practice is hard, really hard. And then he used the military as an analogy. He said, training the mind is like training for the military. I spent 24 years in the Marine Corps active duty and reserves, so I know a thing or two about tough training. It requires more than just physical fitness. It requires great mental fitness to push yourself harder than you've ever been pushed before, because you have to keep a clear mind in order to make decisions under extreme stress. Isn't that what mindfulness is ultimately all about? I can assure you, having to keep up the same level of physical and mental fitness as an 18-year-old when I was 47 was even harder. Now that I'm 75, I wish I discovered Won Buddhism a lot younger, or as a lot younger man. I may be wiser now, but I find study and meditation is much harder at my age. And finally, I remember Reverend Yu's words about needing allies or friendly troops for the battle between the mind and the Dharma. I learned that very well in the Marine Corps. I fought in 2 wars. I could give lots of examples from my own experience that when you get right down to it, soldiers don't fight for their country or their flag. They fight for their friends because they depend on you and you depend on them for your very life. So like soldiers, Buddhists need allies as well. On Thursday nights, you all are my allies. Your comments, your presentations, and your discussion bolster me in my journey. Reverend Yu and Grace, or at home in the Chapel Hill Temple, Wong Gong and Ginger, and all the Sangha are my allies. Hillary Clinton once said, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it takes a village to become and remain a Buddhist as well. So thank you all for helping me along my path. Thank you.
Thank you so much, both to Bob and to Christine. And so we now open it up to all the allies for your reflections or your words of encouragement or your questions. We open it up to you. I just want to say, when you both mentioned Ruth Bader Ginsburg, so I was watching the documentary, and I don't know if any of you noticed it, but most of the brooches that she wore was a circle. And as one Buddhist nerd, that's all I see. I just see circles. The first thing I say is she could be, but it was interesting to see that. But I also, after watching that documentary, was so moved by her life. And you could just tell, I mean, for her love for Marty, and just, I don't know, his support as well was important, was pivotal. So seeing that was encouraging, but just the work, like dedicating her life. Like, to me, that's a bodhisattva. You know, she really lived the teachings, the one Buddhist teachings, in her own way, by not only you know, cultivating herself, but being of service to her family. Like, as Bob was mentioning, she, you know, when Marty was sick, she was there to support him. So it was her family, and then the community. And then now, after her passing, you see, she really affected the whole world. And that's basically what our founding motive is in One Buddhism as well, is to benefit ourselves so that we can benefit our families, our communities, and the world. It's like that ripple effect. And that's why One Buddhism, we're small, we're a baby tradition. We're only 105 years old, but we're cultivating these bodhisattvas, these Buddhas right now. Each and every one of you is that Buddha. And us coming together to practice is for the greater purpose of being, you know, of service to others. So thank you. And I'm just gonna move it to Tiffany.
So if I can, I just have two quick questions. One, the both of you were fantastic this evening, chock full of notes and trying to capture what you both imparted upon us in such an efficient and great way. First, my question for Christine. You mentioned the author. I'm not familiar with him. The late brother Wayne Tisdale. Could you just talk a little bit more about why you chose that? I think what I got was the interconnectedness, and just kind of your thoughts about that.
So the reason I chose him, and I can't even remember the book I was reading when I found this phrase, but he's the one who coined the term interspiritual.
That was the term.
So that term interspiritual to me means between all of our spirits, between all of our spiritual traditions, between all of our spiritual ways of being, between all of our spiritual ways of doing everything, and that they're all one. So he said the shared mystic heart beating in the center of the world's deepest spiritual traditions is all the same. So, you know, every spiritual tradition out there really has the same focus, you know, our oneness, find your true self, heal the world. I just love that word interspiritual. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That was a new term to me. So
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Never heard that. And then Bob, just right quick, I was struck by when you said soldiers don't necessarily fight for their country, but for their friends. Could you talk a bit more about how that connects with the element of Won Buddhism and the larger community? Because I find that interesting, because I always think of, you know, you incorporate the world, whether or not they're practitioners, but really there's also that intimacy among practitioners.
Well, there's a wonderful story. I can't think of the book right now, but I think it was McCullough, who was a corporal in the Marines on the Battle of Okinawa, and he was wounded. And in the book he wrote, 50 years later, he went back and visited all the battles of the Pacific and what they were like, what kind of monuments the Japanese had there versus the Americans, all that sort of thing. And he talked about the battles, and he talked about what he personally did in some of the battles. And he was wounded, and he sent back to an aid station. He snuck out of the aid station, got back to his unit in the same foxhole, and fought again and was wounded a second time. And then as an older man, he went back and found that foxhole and spent a night there to remember all that went on in his mind. And he talked about the same thing I and everyone else who's been wounded, and I was wounded twice in Vietnam on the same day. When you leave, you feel such guilt. Not guilt that you're still alive, you're really happy you're still alive, but guilt that you've left your friends and they may not do as well because you're not there anymore. And we're all, again, Buddhism, we're all one. the people who are suffering from right now, certainly the people who are suffering from coronavirus, their families. It almost brings tears to my eyes even to think about that. That we are all one, and of course you watch the nightly news about that, and look at what's happening in other countries with the refugees in camps or a camp burning down. It just goes on. I had an evangelical Christian friend recently email me, well, the Bible's right. It's Revelations. It's all coming together. The fires, the floods, the death. Trump's efforts in the Middle East. I just said, that's very nice. I hope, I appreciate you believe in your religion. I don't quite agree with you. But at any rate, the point being, there is so much going on, and we all feel as Buddhists, and hopefully all religions, you know, the single factor in all religions, as we just said, as Christine just said, love your neighbor as yourself. And your neighbor is everyone. All those people who are suffering, whether they're out of a job, trying to pay their rent, whether they're suffering from coronavirus, whether they're in a refugee camp in Somalia or something. Anyway, to me, that whole business of in the military, it's one of the reasons they have all this bonding that goes on by putting you through utter hell. You become so close to the people you're with, and then once you actually get into the combat thing, and I don't like wars. My wife was amazed. I know I'm getting off the subject. We went to the 50th anniversary of my Marine Corps officers class last spring, and my wife was dumbfounded. She thought they'd be a bunch of skinhead, jarheads, right-wingers. No, they were almost all Democrats. They were all against war. Even the ones who had stayed in and became full colonels and had fought in the Middle East, anti-war, they all agree almost all wars are unnecessary. They're horrible. So anyway, I could go on and on about that kind of thing, but the whole thing is that everyone's your brother, and we are all one. We're all in this big world of suffering together. I hope that answered it without going off the rails.
No, it did. Thank you for that story. Thank you.
Kathy.
I wanted to thank you both. Really wonderful. I think it was hard for, at least I'll speak for myself, to respond to after your talks because I'm so moved by both of you. Ed, I have to say that when you're speaking about the war, I as much empathy as I can have, I have no experience. So it's always difficult for me to really understand, you know, really get an idea. But the way that you describe it is so moving. And so thank you for that. Thank you for letting me glimpse, you know, the fighting for your friends and just in a little bit, as much as I possibly can. I feel really grateful for that, to be able to see it through your eyes and get a you know, more openness and try to really understand a little bit. And so that was really, really beautiful, and I appreciate it. And it is so much, Grace mentioned Bodhisattva, right? That we're fighting for each other. And you said we're all one. So we're doing this together. We're all in the trenches together. So I'm really grateful. Thank you for that. Thank you. And then Christine, your whole, Chris, your whole talk about all of it, your practice and returning to love and how important that is right now. And then you mentioned about the scripture, about Won Buddhism and how it's one religion. And Venerable Jigsanim, I remember him saying at the Won Dharma Center, he said that this book is a translation book for all other religions. And it is. I really, really believe that. I feel like I understand the Bible better for having read, or different books for having read the scriptures. It's such a beautiful thing. But I'm sorry I don't have really a question. I just wanted to tell you that I really appreciate the talks. I really, really do. And thank you so much, both of you. Really lovely.
Thank you, Kathy.
Can I just make one comment? This is Franny. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Franny, Isabel, and Matt. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. You said I can go and then Matt, or?
Yeah. Franny, you go first. Yes.
It's just really, really quick. It's just another quote by RBG, and she just said, wanting everyone to have health care and food does not make you a communist, socialist, or patriotic. It just makes you a good person. And the other thing I wanted to say, besides thank you for the talks, was when Christine, you were talking about the quote, it's also something Thich Nhat Hanh talks about. He always uses that phrase interbeing when he was giving his Dharma talks, and the people that are his followers is just another way to say that interconnectedness. And I love the quotes that you gave, Christine. Both of your talks were fantastic. So thank you.
Okay. So, and then I think also Desi. So Isabel, Matt, and then Desi. Isabel, did you want to share? Or Matt first then? Matt? Okay. Go ahead, Matt.
Hear me? Yes. Um, Thank you for the presentations. And Christine, I really appreciate your 5 practices. I wrote those down. Those are wonderful. I love the simplicity, and I appreciate you sharing them. If you wouldn't mind, I have a question. The books that you had mentioned, I didn't get to write those down. What were they that you referenced?
So the one book is called The Holy Man, and it's by Susan Trott. There's another one called The Holy Man's Journey, which is the sequel, which we didn't really like as much, but this one is just a very interesting book, full of it's backwards, obviously, but it's called The Holy Man. It's in paperback. I'm sure it's easy to find.
Great, thank
And the other, I don't think, the quotes I got were really from the internet. I have to remember where I got the quote from Mirabai Starr and Wayne Teasdale, and I can't remember. I have so many books out, but when I find them, I'll make sure to bring those citations for you.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Matthew. And then Desi. Did you have a question, Desi?
It's my turn.
Oh, okay. Okay, I wasn't sure. Okay, Isabel, then Desi, and then Brenda also had a question in the chat. So I want to just make sure I'm covering everybody. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, it's very short what I wanted to say. I was just really impressed and touched by both of the talks. And Christine, you did such a beautiful and intelligent, you did it so intelligently and beautifully. You know, you talk so much about Won Buddhism without talking that much about Won Buddhism. You were talking about everybody else. And it was just so touching because it just really illustrates how many of us feel about it, because that's what makes Won Buddhism so wonderful and so inclusive. It is so inclusive. And you know, I do the same thing. I have many people. Thich Nhat Hanh is one of the ones that I follow a lot, and it's just so very. Thank you for putting it that way. It was just very beautiful. And Ed, I was just so touched. I had tears in my eyes when you finished talking. It was, did you talking about, yeah, the same part about fighting for your friends and what you felt, and even when you talk later about the person going back to the places where he fought in Japan, I think you said.
Okinawa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so touching, you know. I feel so many times so far away from people who are just like probably like your wife, you said, and you know, so far away from people who have been in the army or fighting, or I just have no relationship to it, and you just brought it home for me. It just was just so touching. Thank you so much for that. It really made a difference for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Isabel, and then now to Desi.
I wanted to thank both of you for your presentations. I really enjoyed both of them for many different reasons. I was going to ask you, I had one question for each. I guess my first question for Christine, if I could ask you, what scripture most sticks out to you and most sort of resonates with you in your practice?
At this point, I really am, I can't say that there's one. I still feel like I'm learning so much that each week I learn more and it adds to what I know. And the one this week, and that's why I chose it, was the one about incorporating and making use as well of the doctrines of all the world's religions. And to me, that was the uniting piece. So that's why I chose that one. And this week I love that one, but next week it could be another one. So yeah, I think it changes depending on what I'm reading, what I'm studying. But Won Buddhism always awakens in me just heartfelt sentiments that make me want to be the best I can.
And Bob?
Yes.
My question, I was intrigued when you so generously admitted that you felt for you that it was a little bit more of a challenge for the meditation. I really thank you for that. What sort of tips would you give those, however, because you say it's challenging, but you're still doing it. What tips would you give those of us who also fall in that same boat?
Wow. Well, I'm not one. I don't think I'm the best one to give advice. My practice, a lot of it is the readings and the Dharma discussions in this class on Thursday nights. As far as just sitting down and quietly meditating, I do it sometimes, but not a lot. We're very fortunate. We live on a lake in Cary, North Carolina, and we have a 2-story house with a 2nd-story porch. And in the morning, I can go out there, and the lake's quiet, and sometimes there's some squirrels running around or whatever, or some geese floating by, and that's a beautiful, quiet time. But I don't do that as much as I should. One of the things I do, since my gym closed down, I used to go to the gym every day. Again, I'm retired, so I have the time. And so I started walking. Well, Wang Gong, the reverend at the Chapel Hill, North Carolina temple, has recordings of chants, and some have music in addition, or it's not. Sometimes it's just her, sometimes it's music, sometimes there's several people all at once. And I've got a little CD player I carry with me, and I can listen to. I walk anywhere from 2 to 6 miles. Well, 3 to 6 miles actually. So it's either a 1 hour or 2 hour walk, and the disc is an hour long. So I can go. That can be part of my meditation, as a walking meditation, listening to those chants. And the even funnier thing, we had a retreat a few weeks ago, and I thought, oh no, we're going to sit there all day contemplating our navels. This is going to be horrible. It was a virtual retreat, worse. So you're sitting at home. I thought, oh, this is going to be awful. Well, there was a little sitting meditation, but there was chanting, there was singing, there was reciting things, there was Dharma discussions, but she also did a laughing meditation, had us all just laugh out loud for a couple of minutes, a clapping meditation. She even took 30 minutes and said, okay, we're doing a decluttering meditation in your own home. And in fact, next week she's having an hour-long decluttering meditation. So there, you can meditate doing anything. For me, washing the dishes is a relaxing, quiet, calming thing. And I can think of some of the Dharma while I'm doing that. So anyway, I guess my suggestion is there's opportunity for meditation all day long. It's not just sitting quietly trying to keep your mind clear. It can be a lot of things.
Thank you for that sharing. Bob, I think this question is for you. Brenda was asking, whose military biography did you mention?
Oh, I'm sorry. I will look it up and send it to you. My mind went blank. It's one of the better known authors. I wanted to say David McCulloch, but I could be wrong. A fellow who'd written a lot of books, and this is about the history of the battles of the Pacific in World War II. And he writes about the battle, and then he went and visited each site. The interesting thing, when he visits a site, he wasn't personally involved in every one of them. He talks about the visitors from Japan that go to those sites who've lost relatives there, and the size of the monuments that are there compared to almost nothing, if anything, that the Americans have there. And the Americans lost, in many cases, as many people there, but Americans don't visit those places. It's very, very interesting comparison. But anyway, I'll look it up and I'll send it to you all. I'll find it.
Thank you. And now, Reverend Yu, if you can, that's a sharing.
Thank you for your great presentation. At the first class, we studied Ilun-san, or why we study Dharma. The picture of our mind, everybody's mind and heart, our hometown. This is where we come from, and this is the place where we are supposed to return in order to live a happy and free life. Kind of happy and freedom that's perpetual and indestructible. And the second class, we studied the chart of the doctrine. And then in the previous class, last class we studied the founding motive of the teaching. As we all know, each and every sage's idea or their vision or work is one and the same: to lead all people, all sentient beings to paradise. But what causes the suffering? What causes the suffering is different. So, our founding master said, in this contemporary society, whether it's in the West or in the East, the dominating material civilization that really weakens our mind and heart. Our mind becomes enslaved by the force of the material civilization. How can we enter into nirvana? How can we attain complete liberation? By empowering our mind, by enhancing our spirituality. For that, we learn the two gateways: the gateway of a faith, the gateway of a practice. It is the path to empower our mind and to create lots of blessings. That's what we learned in the previous class. Today, we are learning outline of the teaching, So in order to realize that goal, what is our founding master's master plan? When you build a house, you have to consider the external conditions or environment. Is that very windy area? Or is that very hot? Or the land, the ground is inclined or flat? You have to consider lots of factors, and then you build a house. Likewise, our founding master observing the contemporary society, and then he created his master plan that is contained in this chapter 2, outline of the teaching, outline of the one Buddhist teaching. So let me read the first. The first paragraph shows Buddhism is unsurpassed, great way. Its truth and expedience are immense. So the numerous masters have taken them as the basis of various schools, thereby opening the gates of propagation and teaching countless people. Our founding master attained great enlightenment without being guided by any teacher, by any Buddhist priest. But after he attained great enlightenment, he asked his followers to bring lots of scriptures of various traditions. And he read the Taoist, Confucian, Buddhist, lots of scriptures. Particularly after he read the Diamond Sutra, this is what he said. After he read the Diamond Sutra, he said, Shakyamuni Buddha is truly the sage of all sages. Even though I have attained the way without the guidance of the teacher, looking back from the time of my initial aspiration to my final enlightenment, many aspects of my experience coincide with the practice saying of the Buddha in the past. And then he linked his Dharma lineage to Buddhism. Why our tradition is called One Buddhism. In other words, our tradition is linked Dharma-wise to traditional Buddhism. This happened after reading our founding master's Diamond Sutra. He said, Shakyamuni Buddha is the sage of all sages. You have heard about what Feng Shui means. Feng Shui, the study of the energy. Especially each and every country has a different direction about Feng Shui. But in Korea, which is very mountainous country, Feng Shui is developed which part of the area, because there are lots of mountains and the rivers up and down. Which part of the area has a lot of good energy? Which area gathers a lot of auspicious energy? In that direction, Korean Feng Shui is developed. So according to the Feng Shui theory, good energy, good and auspicious energy, they don't have a lot of good auspicious energy on the flat area. Usually around or at the mountain range, they say they have a good range. This is very well known Feng Shui saying, 회령고저, 회령고저. This four Chinese character means, Yong means dragon, 회령 means dragon looking back. So mountain range looks like a dragon. When the tail of the dragon becomes a little round, that tail looks back the head of the dragon. That tail part, but inside that circle, that tail part has the most auspicious and intense and good energy. They usually build a temples retreat center, particularly on that spot. Our second head Dharma master said, even though mountains are insentient beings, if the mountain, at the end part of the tail of the dragon, looks back its head, its origin, that part has a lot of good energy. Likewise, we humans look back the origin of our being. It can be our parents, our ancestors, more fundamentally speaking, the saints and the sages who gave birth to our body and mind. If we remember and venerate our true spiritual origin, then whether it is humans or religious orders, that really becomes, that person or that order becomes very much empowered and strengthened. So saying this Feng Shui theory, our second head Dharma master said, why won't Buddhism become prosperous in the future? Our founding master said that in the very near future, Buddhism would become the major religion in the whole world. Why one Buddhism could be empowered and strengthened? The first reason is, he said, our founding master linked one Buddhism to traditional Buddhism, linked to Shakyamuni Buddha. The fundamental principle of all the world's religions are also essentially one, but as different religions have long been established with different systems and experience, there have not a few instances of a failure to reach a harmony and a dialogue between these religious groups. All this is due to the ignorance of the fundamental principles underlying all religions and their sects. How could this be the original intent of all Buddhas and the sages? So this first paragraph, our founding master already thought. In one Buddhism, we usually call that united religions. As I said before, by what is the lesson of 9/11? We can summarize that in one simple sentence. Without the peace among religions in this world, there would be no peace in this world. So all the battles and the conflicts throughout the history has been caused directly or indirectly by the misunderstanding or the conflict of a religion. In other words, in order to realize peace on earth, religious workers understanding each other, working each other is a very critical factor, very critical factor. So this first sentence clearly says that looking back At the Buddhism of the past, its institutions were originally made in terms of the monastic order, blah, 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 blah. In such a situation, no matter how good the Buddha Dharma, it would be difficult for all living creatures in this boundless world to gain access to the Buddha's grace. How could this be the consummate and the great way? One student asked, what is the great way? Our founding master replied without any hesitation, the Dharma that can be practiced by all people is the great way. Not the Dharma that can be practiced by the people with the highest intelligence or with the highest spirituality. The Dharma that's practiced by all people, by all regular people. That's the great way. The Dharma that can be practiced by a small group of people, by select group of people is a small way, great way. So the tradition of Buddhism, as this passage says, it's mainly created for monastics. When you go to China, Japan, Korea, when the meditation session starts for months, do you know how many hours they sit in average in the meditation? Summer and the winter meditation. In average, they practice sitting meditation for 12 hours. Some monastery, they practice 9 hours. Some monastery practice for 15 hours. However great, let's suppose it's a great, excellent way. But regular people cannot use that type of approach, even though it is an excellent path. In other words, Sote-san said, that is not the great way. That's the direction how he renovated the tradition of Buddhism. So this one Buddhist scripture, especially the canon part, was created by Sote-san. 3 years after his great enlightenment, he retreated himself in Byeonsan area with less than 5 of his followers. So one day, he asked to his followers, for the future, when I create one Buddhist teaching, one Buddhist Dharma, what direction do you think am I supposed to follow? In what way should I create the one Buddhist teaching? So several of his followers answered this and that way. Our second head Dharma master answered, the future Dharma should fit to our daily life. Our founding master said, you read my mind. You read my mind. That's why the direction of Sote-san's creating the Dharma is very, very simple. Buddha Dharma is a daily life, and the daily life is a Buddha Dharma. For that direction, he renovated, modernized traditional Buddhism. For example, as you can see in this chart of the doctrine, traditional Buddhism emphasized sitting meditation, but it has been broadened to timeless meditation and placeless meditation. In the area of faith, they worshiped Buddha or Buddha image, or they rely on God in the Judeo-Christian tradition. But the object of faith has been broadened and actualized. So the object of faith is from Buddha or God to each and every person, every real Buddha image, every act Buddha offering. So whether it's the faith part or practice part, it has been renovated so that each and every person, a regular people, can use Buddha Dharma in the future. That's the direction of the One Buddhist teaching. So it says, therefore, we have enshrined as the object of faith and the model of a practice of Ilwansang, Dharmakaya Buddha, which is the original source of all beings and the mind. Think about that. The object of faith is Shakyamuni Buddha or Jesus. How can all those religious leaders can work together? If it is the object of faith is the truth itself, not the personalized truth or reality, the truth itself, Dharmakaya Buddha, then all the religious workers can gather together. So the last thing, our aim is to become adherents of a broad and consummate religion by incorporating and making use as well as of the doctrines of the older world religions. Who is a true One Buddhist? Who is the modern One Buddhist? The person who has a broad and consummate religion, that kind of a view, by incorporating and making use as well as the doctrines of the world religions. So chapter 12, the essential discourse on commending the nature. On the later part of the One Buddhist canon, you can see this chapter. It's 16 articles of how we could commend our true nature, original nature. The first one, believe not just in the person alone, but in the Dharma. You know what? This first item was the fifth originally. But before Sotaesan's passing, he asked his followers, this article should come first, should become the first article. Believe not just in the person alone, but in the Dharma. In that way, all the religious workers can understand others objectively and work together. Our founding master mentioned a lot about the Diamond Sutra, which is currently located at North Korea. He said very often, in the future, UN would become more powerful. UN, the political entity where politicians gather together to solve a lot of issues in this world. But in a very near future, some organizations which is composed of the all religious leaders. I'm not sure he coined the word United Religions. That organization will be established and grow very, very influential. Our founding master used the analogy, UN will work like a strict father, and will work like a compassionate mother. Just like in one house, we need two parents. just like a cart goes with the help of the two wheels. You and strict father, you are the compassionate father, will work together very well. Because there are lots of issues that political leaders gather together. It's very hard for them to reach a conclusion because of the conflict of interest. But religious leaders are easy to reach some conclusion. So I sincerely hope in a very near future, we can all go to the Diamond Mountain. Founding message said, the center of UR, headquarters of the UR will be established in the Diamond Mountain. Let's all go to Yongsan Stay next year in May. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Yu. That would be a dream if we could all go to the Diamond Mountain. I've not been there yet, but I heard it's beautiful. So that will be on our to-do list. So let's start saving up now. And now we're going to go into our breakout rooms. There's so much that we can be discussing. The wonderful presentations today, Reverend Yu's lecture where he covered Buddhism as the great way, and just he mentioned believe not just in the person alone, but in the Dharma. So let's take some time to get into our small groups, and I'll open the rooms right now.
We're back.
Yep, still some groups coming back in. Okay, here we go. Great, great. So we're back again.
Grace?
Oh, sorry.
Frozen? Grace?
Oh, she froze.
Uh,
Oh, she's back.
okay.
Okay.
Grace?
Sorry, I don't weak signal right now, so just we'll go right into it. Is there any group that would like to share with the larger group of some things that may have come up for you?
Grace?
Sure, go ahead.
I know we don't have enough time, but before this class end, I want to ask Reverend Yu and Reverend Grace, you two both, about the scripture, because I want to know about it. Please let me be clear. Master Sutesan said, let's utilize matter. But in the founding motive, he said, let us conquer material power by expanding the spiritual power. So what's the difference, utilize matter and conquer the material power? For me, English second language user, conquer the material power feels, wow, it's quite strong. So what's the difference?
So I recently watched a documentary. I mentioned this in one of the reflection papers. It's called The Social Dilemma, and it's talking about the dangers of social media, of the internet, and that the industry itself is functioning in a way that they want you to get hooked on social media. They are creating the algorithms to get your attention, to check, to scroll. And so can you imagine the power that is having, especially on the younger generation? And if you can feel it sometimes when you don't need to check your social media, but there's this pull. And if you have that mind power, you're able to control that. But for many of us, we don't have that mind power. We are controlled by the device itself. So when he's talking about conquer, we're talking about this is a battle, really, between yourself and this material world. He wasn't saying that material was bad. And even the second prime Dharma master, he says that. He said, in fact, it brings us many conveniences in life. The only issue is that right now, technology is created so that we're not in control of it, but it's controlling us. So what Master Sotasan is saying, in order for us to actually utilize it in the best way possible, we first must be able to control the material and not have it control us. So when he uses that word conquer, I think it goes very nicely with what Reverend Yu was saying about training. Like, it's interesting how Master Sotasan uses the word training and not just practice. He's saying this is the training ground that we're working in right now, right? And in order for us to function and to work in harmony with material, we have to be able to train our mind, which means repetition, to be able to not be enticed or pulled by things, but for us to be able to use it in the best way possible. So when he's talking about conquering, it means first being able to be in control of the objects itself, not having control us, and only then we can use it in the best way possible, right? So in the outline of the teaching too, he uses the word utilize as well, right? Make use of. And that's the same idea, is that understand the essence of each religion. And like you're like a chef, like Matt in the Beautiful One Dharma Center, who does his art, right? He's able to take these ingredients and create something beautiful. So that's the same way, utilize it. Not just using, it's like utilizing, making use of. So I hope that helps. Any other sharings? Yes, Matt Ginter.
Just something that when you were noting, or when you were talking about that documentary, something that I've noticed that I've been a little perplexed by, and I'm still formulating what I think about it. But I've noticed in my work with high school students, there's a great concern about, as you said, social media and its effect. But what I'm actually seeing is that it is more my coworkers that seem perplexed and stunted by social media, and my students who are much more able, the students who have grown up with it their entire lives at this point, they seem far more immune to it and utilizing it more. Like, I can also see it in my younger, like the 20-year-old coworkers. They seem less stunted with it or disjointed by it than like my 30 and 40 and 50-year-old coworkers. My 60-year-old coworkers generally don't use it, so they've just ignored the whole thing. It's a fad they're not concerned with. But I just kind of wondered if others had the same experience and what they thought of that.
Sorry, my internet just went out. What was your last part of that question, Matt?
Just what others thought of that and if they had similar experiences.
Hello?
Oh, Matthew, the other Matthew, yes.
Yeah, I never got onto the whole social media thing. I find it kind of boring, and I'm not promoting anything or selling anything. It doesn't really serve me. I use it to communicate with people, but I for the most part, it doesn't really, it's not a factor in my life. But I have seen it affect a lot of my friends, and it's been, yeah. My father uses Facebook more than I do, so. But my experience is that I find it kind of boring.
I want to check in with Patty. Patty, nice to have you here. Oh, is it your microphone?
Her microphone is not working. Patty's microphone is not
Oh,
working.
it's not working. Okay. Okay. All righty. Is there any other group that would like to share? Franny, I see your
Oh,
microphone.
well, I don't want to share, Desi will, but I just wanted to say that I watched that documentary, and I think everybody should watch it because it was just so eye-opening. My son, who uses social media a lot, told me about it, and I think it really helped him. We just have to be really careful, and that was so poignant, that the documentary. I forget the name of it, but it was wonderful.
What is the name of it?
Something, do you remember?
Social dilemma.
The reform. It's a documentary about how destructive social media could be if you let it enslave you, and if you don't use it right. And that's the whole purpose. That was the whole purpose of it. I mean, people that worked for Facebook that no longer do it we're saying that that's what they want us to do, to become slaves of social media. And I don't remember the exact name of it, but it was fantastic.
Well, what rang alarm bells for me was, so they were interviewing former employees of Uber and Facebook and Instagram. And what they had said is, because they knew the effect of technology, they don't allow their children to use social media. So that's a big sign. So they know the impact. Okay.
Yeah, that's like the owner of a liquor shop that doesn't drink any liquor, right? Same thing.
Desi, I think Franny had asked you to share. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. I guess our group, we were very thankful for this week's readings, and also for the talk that Reverend you gave today or this evening. All week there just been different experiences that we've all had, and just the readings as well as with the talk, it sort of helped to bring things together. They really resonated and trickled down and sort of resolved many questions and doubts, or at least moved us along the path. And especially the idea that having Ilvan as the object of faith and the unifying figure, or if for lack of a better word, the unifying force, to bring all of the religions together, as opposed to having a person as the central object of faith. And then also the fact that this Dharma is one that one can immediately apply in their daily life, in every facet of their daily life. And how some themes that were kept coming up were sincerity, non-judgment, being able to question, being able to talk with others about their questions, having that sort of opening and gentle nature and forum in which to do that with whomever. And that just felt so comforting, to be able to have a Dharma, to have a family that offers that it sort of gives one the lack of a better word, license to just want to keep doing it. So just like new shoots come out of the plant because the plant is nurtured. Same thing, I guess. I guess Allison also brought up how she really it resonated with her Buddha, the chapter 7 in Buddhahood. For her, it was like the Dharma was something that goes beyond the traditions and beyond the words and all that, but it's also, one still can bring things from their past and all those traditions they know, but also there's also some understanding. This Dharma allows for an understanding, not only in the head, but in the heart. So one can fully incorporate it. And it's not just that you have to follow orders or directions, but it's giving one a direction. So yeah, those are a few things that came up for us. Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Franny.
Thank you for sharing that, Desi. And I think Patty now has a microphone. We just want to check in with you, Patty. How's everything going?
Check, check. Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is a brand new machine I bought to put on my screen so I could do this class, and the microphone's not working. And now I'm completely lost because I had to get this whole thing set up. But mainly, you know, the one thing I appreciate so much about Won Buddhism is that I went on my own journey of trying to find the right place. So I visited many different churches, if you will, and none of them were really appealing to me. But I noticed that they all had the same similar, not the same, messages. And early on, I realized that, you know, in the Catholic Church that my parents belonged to, that what we were being taught was not being practiced. Mm-hmm. You know, and I don't want to be mean to the people that I used to go to church to, but so I just kept on this journey of like, I have to find something, I have to find something. So I came to the One Dharma Center and I read the Ilwan song for the first time. And my brain went, aha, I think I found it. And when I read these scriptures, they reflect so much of things that I'm already believing in and understanding about life. It's uncanny that I can relate to the things that I'm reading here at such a level that this whole social media and electronic devices, like, I see how this is affecting everyone. And I see how dependent they're making us. Like my first example was when I had a Pepsi, I opened up a Pepsi bottle, and inside it said, to see if you've won a prize, log into pepsi.co.com or whatever. And I thought, what if I didn't have a computer? I'd never win a prize. So they started making it that if you wanted anything, you would have to be on the computer. You know, society is building this, and the people behind it are building this. And I don't know what the answer is. You know, now school is online. Even before that, lessons were sent over the computer. They got rid of the calendars they were sending us home about the school year, and they were saying, go online and find the calendar. Like, everything is being done that way now. So we are losing our power in that respect. So how do we gain that back? And I guess it's by properly utilizing these things for our benefit, not just because we have to, is my first thing. Like this phone I have, I don't like using it as a computer. It's a phone. When I first saw people walking through parking lots with a phone on their ear, I thought they were insane. Who wants to leave the house and take a phone with them? You know, go home, get your phone calls. So I've watched the progression, the internet, how it was free. Now you have to pay for it. Phones were at home. Now you take it with you. You don't have a minute where people aren't calling you or sending you emails, and you don't have that quiet time that we used to have, where we noticed the beautiful sunlight and the bright stars and the nature. You know, we don't see it anymore. And so that's part of my practice, is to get rid of this as much as possible. And here we are in class, online. But desperate times call for desperate measures. But this is using it in a powerful way, because the message that we're getting from these lessons is necessary. It's necessary for us to move forward in our practice. And I'm very grateful for everything that I've been reading. And I'm sorry I've missed classes, but
That's okay.
I'm here tonight. I have a funeral to go to next week, so I may not be online next Thursday. So I just want to say it was nice to see everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you for this class. Thank you.
Thank you for coming, Patty. It's good to see you. And Reverend Yu, before we close, did you have any closing remarks for us?
Can you see this photo? Laughing Buddha, Hotel. You may be a little familiar with this Bodhisattva image. He is a historical figure in China, Chinese Buddhist master. Hotel. Hotel means backpack, bag, because he always carried one big bag on his back. Lots of masters, including our second head Dharma master, third head Dharma master. He is the manifestation of the future Buddha, Maitreya Buddha, future Buddha, Maitreya Buddha. Actually, he indirectly said that in his poem. Why I mention about him? In the room of our third head Dharma master, he had a couple of his images, the small statue. Why? He is the future Buddha. For example, when you go to the Asian Buddhist monastery, there is some specific temple which enshrine the Bodhisattva of great compassion, Gwanamjan, or some temple is dedicated to Jijo Bodhisattva, Earth Store Bodhisattva. The main temple is usually dedicated to Amitabha Buddha or Shakyamuni Buddha. But do you know where they enshrine his image? In China, they put the statue of this Hote Master, Hote Bodhisattva, at the gateway of the monastery, which he symbolized. He is neither layperson nor ordained. In other words, in the future, there is no distinction between being layperson and being monastic. The holy, the secular, there is no that kind of a thing existent in the future. That's how this master lived. He didn't reside inside the monastery. He slept in the village, usually under the bridge. He loved, especially playing with the children. He loved drinking wine, etc. He acted like a secular person. So his whole lifestyle is a very symbolic thing. This is exactly the direction of the future religion, not just the future Buddha Dharma. So that's why in our second head Dharma master's room, he didn't have many things in his room. The room is extremely simple, but he had a couple of living Buddha's image. So this is how we should live. So being monastic lay person, being monastic, it's up to our mind, up to our mind. Our third head Dharma master once resided in some small house at the foot of the Birok mountain. Birok means Maitreya Buddha, Maitreya Buddha. There is a legend, there is a traditional saying, at the foot of the Maitreya Buddha mountain, there will be established hundreds of thousands of monasteries. But during the period of the time of our third head Dharma master, our third head Dharma master's attendant, Venerable Jangsanim, Jangsanim asked, still, we don't see many monasteries in our town. Our third head Dharma master said, there will be established hundreds of thousands of monasteries, means each and every house will become a practice center. That's the truthful, authentic meaning about that saying. So your house, this online class is the retreat center and the monastery. Let's make your life in that way. Thank you.
Great message, Reverend Yu. Okay, so next week our presentations will be from Isabel and James. Okie dokie. All right. So everyone, thank you so much for our online family. Get some rest and see you next week. Bye.
Thank you, Grace.
Song? Uh-oh. Mister.